All right, in this video we're going to pick up where we left off. If you recall, we had just finished page 80 and we're going to go into the authorization section of the application build. Before we proceed with this section, it is highly recommended that you make a backup copy of your application at this point if it's working just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Visual Studio. I'm going to close my solution. And then I'm going to jump down to my file system and find my application. Which is this one here. I'm going to make a copy, paste it back in. I'm right-click, rename. All right, so now I can proceed with peace of mind, knowing that I'm not going to lose anything that I've done up until this point. I know that, I should have done that in the previous video before I begun my work, and I didn't, and I should have. I mean, that's kind of been my pattern. But it's really important at this step because I know that at this point in the application build, we can run into a number of different problems for a number of different reasons, complicated by which version of Visual Studio you're using. Keep in mind that the author of the tutorial wrote this in Visual Studio 2010, I believe. And there's certain things in the interface of Visual Studio 2010 that do not exist in the interface of the versions that follow. Not that the tools aren't there, but we have to go hunting for them. It also is kind of an indicator that some techniques for coding certain situations have changed as well. It doesn't mean that they're any less valid than they used to be. It's just that they're a little bit different. Right, now that you have a safe copy, you can go back to Visual Studio and open your project up again. Now the thing that we're going to be working on is creating a login mechanism for authorization. That store manager controller should not be accessible to the user. You don't want your user being able to go in and create something or change the price or delete it or do other malicious things with it. So we are going to use some of the tools that are built in. We're also going to create some new files that will help us to do those actions. All right. One thing that they're pointing out here, and this is true for the more modern versions of doing MVC, it says one difference between the full web application template when you're creating a brand new project and an empty one is that it does not include an account controller. So if you were going to build an MVC application and you did not choose empty, you chose web application, it would build the account controller into the application by default. Does that make sense? It builds the authorization piece in. We didn't do that. That's the point. And I don't know if you guys remember when we first did an empty application build at the beginning of this course, that it created the site, and I even pointed out, look, there's a register and there's a login. I didn't do that, right? And that's what that template would do. Now, we do have some resource files that you guys should have downloaded called MVC Store Assets Zip, and it had a bunch of different files in there. We need to grab the following files from that project. So we need account controller CS, account model CS, And it also says create an account directory inside the views directory and copy all 4 views. Now the thing that's important about this, you're like, well, why would I copy all 4 views? We are going to be copying in a controller and a model, right? And then if we were like building this from scratch, we would also do a scaffolding that would build all the views. And if we would have built the project from default as a web application, not an empty one, it would have automatically created all that stuff right off the bat. Now, we don't want to go through that process. We're just pulling in components so we can use them, which is fine. And that's one of the powers of MVC as well, is that you can take stuff that's pre-built and pull it into your project. It's just going to be a drag and drop, that's correct. So I need to go find my assets here. So let's do that. Okay, for me, I think I put those assets on the desktop here, and I unzip them. And instructions say folder name code. So that's where I'm going right now. Go to my code folder. All right, so the account controller from the controllers directory. So we're going one folder at a time here. So my strategy is going to be to move this off to the side, bring Visual Studio up so I can kind of see both of them. And I'm going to take the account controller and drop it into the controllers folder. I'm going to come back and go to the models folder, and I'm going to pull in the account models file as well. I'm doing a little drag and drop, and that's going right into the models folder. Very strong possibility that we're going to have to make some adjustments here. I know I need to make adjustments because I have the issue of how I named my music store. I thought I was being smart and putting in dashes, and I shouldn't have, because then I could have just copied all the code, copy paste the whole darn application. But those dashes, when it came to namespaces and the like, those ended up becoming underscores. So there's a chance inside here that some of that stuff might come up with red underlines. So I'm just going in to look, and so far so good. So I'm in the account controller. All right, I'm not seeing any underlines, and that's my concern right now. I'm not worried so much about the code. We will look at the code. Also take a look here at the bottom how they have a little section called status codes and see how it's collapsed automatically. And then if you expand that, it has all these error messages that are pre-built. And those error messages, if you're curious, are triggered by the engine that runs. So like if you put in information a certain way, it'll throw a certain error code. It'll come here and give a certain error message based upon that code. I'm also going to jump over the account models file. I'm bringing that up on my screen. And once again, I'm double checking to make sure that I don't have any underlines. Yeah, we got the compare one, and I think you guys may have seen that before. All right, so I had paused the video here for a moment, and I just did a quick poll because I know some of the people in class have worked ahead. And has anybody managed to get past this point successfully? Okay, so we do have a couple people in class, and we have a couple people that have gotten this far and stopped here, per my advice. But whenever we're going to see a red underline in our code, it's going to be indicative of some sort of a problem that probably will stop the application from running. First thing I'm doing is I'm just hovering over the word compare here and it says the type or namespace name compare could not be found. Are you missing a using directive or an assembly reference? What do you guys think? I mean, if you look at the structure of compare, clearly it is some sort of a method, right? How do you know it's some sort of a method? No, because it's followed by a set of parentheses. That's the indicator. All right, so here's the thing that we're going to do before we proceed. Challenge question, and we'll come up with a team solution here. What do we do to fix this? So I'm gonna pause. I'll let you kind of try to figure out how you guys might go about fixing this, and then we'll see if we come up with a solution, and if not, I'll try to find one for us. Okay? But you got to start making the stab in the dark here, and not even a stab in the dark, kind of like the forecasting of the future. Imagine yourself in the workplace, and here you are, and you're looking at that red underline. Are you calling it a day? Are you going to phone it in? What if you don't have somebody else you can turn to and ask? Okay, you're on the job. Put that hat on. How are you going to work past this point? So I'm pausing the video. Let's try to find a solution. So we were discussing a bunch of different things here while we were paused, and somebody just, shouted out. Well, I forget exactly how you said it, but we just added a model to our application and a controller. Guess what we're doing? Clean and rebuild, first step, because we're adding new data components. We're restructuring our data again. So we need to kind of wipe all those little fragments out of memory. Now, notice that does trigger the debugger, right? Because it's going to try to build, and it's pointing to line 26, right, under account models. So we're just going to go to that line, and we know that's exactly where compare is. Notice how it's changed now. Yeah, it's not red anymore. It is now blue. The hovering still gives us the same error. But notice that the error message at the bottom of the screen, and I know that the type is really small, it says, compare attribute is an ambiguous reference between system component model data annotations compare attribute and system.web.mvc compare attribute. What it's telling you is it's like, all right, I know the compare command, but you know what? It exists in two different spots. Which one do you want? Which one would you guess? Yeah, we're building an MVC application. It's probably the right one. So now we have a choice. We could add the using statement that includes the compare attribute, or we can append that to the beginning of the command directly and get it to execute. Now this is something, this is an experience thing, because you guys probably could take that exact error message, and you can do a copy like this, and I'm just going to show you the technique, right? We're kind of positing the fact that you're out in the workplace and you're trying to figure this out on your own. And I would just very simply paste that in, and that's actually kind of obnoxious. Okay, so let's Control-Z that. Let's bring up a text editor and paste it in and kind of buffer it a little bit, because it brings the whole darn thing in there, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get rid of kind of all the inane stuff, because really it's kind of from here on down. They don't care about our personal path, but I bet you I can find this error message. So here I am copying it back over to our Google Overlord, right? Stack Overflow, one of the best sources for information out there. Because we already have that, right? Okay. And it gives you 4 more errors. Wait, hey, look, we got 4 errors too. What a coincidence, right? And the last thing you want to do whenever you're looking at an error list, folks, is fix the one on the bottom. You start at the top, because chances are that first one might be causing a few others. And that's true with any sort of validation. All right, so the guy's like dumping all this code in here. So I'm trying to see if somebody is doing this, right? Or they add that first thing up there. So what they're saying is, when you're using compare, and this is the one that Dallas was pointing out, and we found really 2 different approaches. Now with this one, the person, we don't know if they're doing MVC or not.
Also wording where you were at that said MVC is absolute.
Aha. And when was this dated? Oh, we don't see a date on this, do we? All right. Well, it was about a year ago. About a year ago. All right. So where did you see that MVC was obsolete?
Right here, number 10, that's in
See this? So, well, yeah, see, that's the thing. You know what the worst thing is that's going to happen? We're going to try one approach or the other, and one's going to work and one's not, and chances are we can get both to work. My educated guess would be to go for MVC. But you notice that I just didn't take that at face value. I'm like, I want to be sure. So I'm going to do a little research. Stack Overflow really is a great place to go for this kind of stuff because these are people that are real coders or lots of people like in our situation. And it is the most active community, and the information that I find here tends to be the most accurate. So this will be your friend out in the workplace, you know. So now the thing is, which choice are we going to make? Yeah, you could do it either way. So my preferred way in this spot would probably be to use this because it's quick. So you see what I just highlighted? Versus the using. But then you have to do it in two places. All right, you got more. All right, well then fine. Let's just do it this way. And I think those of you that were stuck here before, right, now we're past this point. Okay. But you see, if you're stuck in a spot like this is the kind of thing you have to do. And you're going to, you know what, in the workplace, you can do this all the time, every day. This is going to be your life. Get used to it. Don't freak out to it. You go with it. You'll find a fix. There's so many people that are coding out there. Coders are great at sharing because everybody runs into problems, so everybody shares. It is. And Stack Overflow, can't say enough positive things about it. That's right. Even if you're working with proprietary software as opposed to open source software. Because the open source community is huge on sharing stuff, but you know what? The proprietary community is too. So people do help each other, maybe not with their specific application. All right, so once again, clean, build. I'm not even looking if it underlined it again. Success. Okay, so the solution that I chose was just to add the single line. We could have used the other approach. It probably would have worked as well also. And the reason that would have worked well for us is because we're using an older framework for MVC. It would have worked. The reason you're seeing that where they're saying it's obsolete, it is obsolete. If I was using MVC 4.5, it would be obsolete. It wouldn't pull it up. Okay. So in this case, this was a good choice. And let's jump back over. Well, we made it through 2 paragraphs. It only took 20 minutes. All right. So we got the controller and the model, and we checked them. And I'm assuming, and now, okay, this is the model. I didn't look at the controller. We didn't have any issues in the controller, right? No issues in the controller. All right. Then the other thing that we were tasked to do is to pull in the 4 views, all the views. All right, we're going to create the account directory, so let's do that first. And this is in the views folder now. So I'm going to right-click views, add, new folder, and is it accounts plural? Can somebody check that for me? Just account. And then back over to our folder where we are going to go to views, account, And then we're going to just drag and drop these right into the account folder. Once again, I am anticipating issues right up front. I just kind of assume that there's going to be issues. So I'm going to, one file at a time now, go through and check them. Once again, it's probably not necessary at this point. I'm going to do a clean and a build just for the sake of it. No harm done, right? Now back down to that views folder, and one file at a time, let's take a look. We're looking for problems, underlines, things that the debugger is just catching right off the bat. I'm not seeing any problems. Moving on to change password. That looks fine. Log on. No problems. Register. No problems. I'm going to hit the Save All button now that I got everything in here, because these files are all new to the application. So now, granted, anytime I do that build, it saves everything anyhow, because it has to. But I'd like you guys to do that too. Even if you don't see any issues, you added a bunch of files. Let's take a look and just make sure. Good practice. In jumping back over to the tutorial here, and somebody very eloquently pointed out once again, there's something you didn't do, right? Because the next set of instructions here, it says change the namespace for the controller and model classes so they begin with MVC Music Store. And for me, I have to change it to something else, and I'm mindful of that. Change the namespace for the controller and model classes. The controller, namespace. See this stuff up here? What I'm going to change it to is this. So I'm grabbing it from one of my other working files, and yours is going to look different because if you follow the instructions and once again didn't put the dashes in your project name like I did, which converted to underscores, yours will probably be without those. Mine unfortunately is this way, so I'm just going with it, but I'm grabbing this from a working file, and then I'm coming back over to the account controller, and I'm just replacing that bit. Now, this is also something that should trigger in your head, and if not, I'm triggering it for you, that, well, if we're using a name for some namespace that we don't have, why is it not throwing an error? Because it assumes you know what you're doing. The namespace is a naming construct. That's all it is. It's grouping things together so you can use a higher level name to access it. All right. We also need to do that in the account model. But you're not going to be using controllers here, if that's what you did. Once again, go to something that already works. Grab it. I'm clicking off the line. I don't have any red underlines. I'm going to do a clean. I'm going to do a build. And then I'm going to check both of those files again, and I'm looking for underlines. Do you see a problem? Right. So you see how the using statement now broke? So really what needs to happen is MVC Music Store needs to be here. That's not any good either. And we have a little bit of a thing we need to fix. And I know that the couple of you that have already finished this, maybe you can give us a clue.
In order to fix that, you need to fix the account models, the MVC music stores.
Okay, so I need to fix the account models to MVC music stores.
And then you gotta put the default.
Yeah,
You need to put in
there's a series of things we need to fix here. We're already into lunch break, and you guys know I like to take my lunch, so this is a great spot to pause, and we're going to come back and fix it, okay?